Hi everyone, it's Feli Day again, writer of paranormal romance. My phone just said that maybe the connection was bad, so if I go in and out, it has nothing to do with me, it has everything to do with Cable Tico. Okay, why am I not showing up on my screen? There I am. Okay, now we can begin. Sorry. I wanted to be able to talk to you about La Hacienda. I was so excited to go. It is, I looked it up, it's the largest maze in the world, except it's made with cactuses. It's kind of weird. It's all this big, someone had built this huge garden with big concentric circles that overlapped. And in the center was sort of like a retreat sanctuary. And along the side are cacti, but they're only like, I don't know, 2 feet tall and 4 feet tall. So, you couldn't drink before you go, because if you tripped or anything, you'd be impaled. But apparently you're supposed to walk this 2-mile maze, and then there's this retreat of, I don't know what they talk about, some woo-woo stuff. Anyway, the lady who had organized it had like a blues festival yesterday and something else tomorrow, and she didn't realize she had like 3 big events in a row. So she had to cancel. But we are going sometime in the near future. La Hacienda lasts until March, and it's only about maybe 45 minutes away from down where we're going to build our house. So anyway, we'll report on that when we see it. If I kind of yawn or look a little sleepy, it's because I had to get up yesterday at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, for those of you who know me, I don't go to bed till 2. So, and you don't fall asleep right away, so 6 was just a tad early for me. We had to drive to San Jose. San Jose is the capital, and I think like 80% of the people live in the city, and then the rest are sprinkled throughout the country. It's normally it takes about 4 hours, but because we left so early in the morning, we got there like in 3.5 hours, and we had to go to the mall to pick up this painting that we had ordered and had framed, and it's amazing, and it's sitting sideways against the wall because my husband has to build up a little rack to put it on, but when it does, I will show you. I suppose I can point to the boring wall. You see my very boring wall, which has nothing on it, and all of my furniture is like monochromatic, and this thing, if I can turn it a little bit, I don't know if you can see it, there's the painting sitting against the wall. It is of Venice, and we honeymooned in Venice, so we thought it was a very appropriate thing to have, and it's the real colorful thing in the house, so I'm very excited when that finally gets up. I forgot, thanks Deb for reminding me, that I had promised to read the first scene of Seduced by Flames, and that is book 2 of my Hidden Realms series. And I'm going to talk a little bit about tips for authors, but hopefully this kind of shows you that I really work hard at trying to make my stories different than the last one. It's really easy to get into the habit of writing hi Ingrid, having the stories sort of be the same plot over and over again. Heroine gets captured, though I have to admit I have affinity for that one. And I think you have a tendency when you set up your world to kind of do the same stuff. So I work very hard to make the bad guys different, to just have a slightly different plot, which is the reason why I kind of switch between the heroine being a dragon and the hero not be, or vice versa. I haven't decided yet if I'll do 2 dragons. They would be so hot and bothered, I would think they would be in bed 98% of the time. And I can't quite figure out, exactly what I will do. In Wares and Witches of Silver Lake, I ended up with 2 witches together, and that didn't quite have the same oomph, I thought, as a shifter and a witch, or shifter than a human. So, anytime you have any suggestions, I'm always happy to them. So without further ado, this is the first scene of the first chapter. And this is the opening of the book, Seduced by Flames. This damn mine would be the death of her yet. Come on, where are you? Dragon shifter Nessa Caspian tapped her nails across the rock face, determined to find the gold vein. Her ability to locate metals by touch had yet to fail her. So why couldn't she sense any now? She was sure the gold was there. Nessa closed her eyes, throwing out more energy to sense the vibrations. Her father's words of worry came back to her, cutting short her concentration. You have a gift, Nessa, but opening a new vein is dangerous, especially at 200 feet below the surface. Dangerous? Ha! Even if the electricity failed, shutting down the elevator between here and the surface, she could still fly up the shaft to escape. You better be right, her dragon said. If you aren't careful and there's another accident, the mining consortium will shut us down. Her hand shook at that terrible thought. Sure, the wealth that this gold would bring her family and their miners would be great. But more than anything, she wanted to prove to her dad that she had the ability to find the perfect mother lode. She'd inherited this talent to read vibrations from rock from her grandfather's great-great-grandfather. No one else in the family could find gems and minerals the way the ancient relative had, until now. Once more, Nessa ran her nails down the cold, rough rock, sensing small tremors. Before she could identify the source, the wall suddenly shook and her pulse soared. This was it. Nessa could almost taste success. Her dad hadn't wanted her to dig this deep, but she promised him that she'd take every precaution. It was why she refused to allow any other workers down here with her. An even larger vibration tingled her fingers, returning her attention to the elusive vein. When a high tinny sound accompanied the trembling, her heart slammed against her ribcage. The frequency, coupled with a distinct pitch, signaled a metal was present. She wouldn't celebrate yet, though. There was a fine line between gold and copper, and between silver and platinum, and Nessa needed to be right this time. After absorbing the sensations for a full minute, she was convinced the frequency and intensity of the trembling matched gold's signature. But the only way to be sure was to dig the rock face and see the metal in its pure form. Leaning back, she extended her arms and pointed to the area that she believed contained the thick gold vein, not merely gold flecks embedded in the rock, and partially shifted her hands into dragon talons. She smiled at what she was about to do. If anyone on Earth had a mother lode like this, they'd celebrate for years. Hell, it might make the history books in her realm of Pterodon. Unlike other dragons, the fire coming out of her talons had laser precision and was coupled with an extremely hot flame, which makes it useless in this situation. Plus, she'd have to be in her dragon form to do that. With total concentration, Nessa bored through the rock, sending bits and pieces of sediment in every direction. A shard flew at her, cutting through her shirt and slicing open her skin. Oh, crap. In her excitement at the discovery, she'd been careless and had forgotten to initiate more of her shift. Stopping for a moment, she concentrated on turning her human skin into protective dragon scales. Phew, that was close. She then continued drilling. Even though the heat blew back in her face, forcing her to squint, it didn't stop her from making progress. After a minute, though, her hands shook from the intense power needed to keep the flame going. Don't fail me now, she demanded of her body. 2 minutes turned into 4. Then, on the next push, the shine of pure gold bounced back at her. Yes! Heart pounding, she cut off the fire and extended her claws on one hand to dig out a sample. The gold had somewhat melted, making it easy to scoop out. Extracting a small container from her pocket, she lifted the exquisite metal to her nose and sniffed, hoping it had the scent of a rose or some exotic flower. It didn't, but a girl could dream. As much as she wanted to paint her body with the stuff in celebration, she placed the scraped metal inside the box. Impossible to remove all of it from her hands, her talons glowed yellow. She wiggled them before letting her hands return to normal. With the exploration complete for now, Nessa fully returned to her human form. Excited about her find, she collected her light and headed back to the elevator. See, Dad, this is the mother lode. Told you I could do it. 10 steps from the metal cage that would take her swiftly to the top and let her bask in her glory. The entire wall exploded, jettisoning her backward. Her mind failed to comprehend what was happening other than to tell her she was in deep shit. Without any conscious thought on her part, her dragon took over and did the shift for her, taking the brunt of the blast. The force slammed Nessa's animals into the stone wall so hard she crumpled to the ground. She tried to bring in her wings to avoid more harm, but something stopped her. As much as she wanted to check out the damage, between all the dust and the flying rocks, she had to keep her eyes closed until the dust settled. A sharp object pierced her skull and she moaned at the intense ache. Where had the detonation come from? She was the only one down there. Rocks continued to fall on top of her and dirt lodged under her scales. Seeking as much safety as possible, she lowered her head and waited for the onslaught of rubble to stop, hoping against hope she wouldn't be buried alive. Seconds passed, and then minutes, as more aftershocks shook the area. When silence finally surrounded her, she took a deep breath to assess the situation and was immediately sent into a coughing fit. Her dragon had never coughed before, and she didn't like it one bit. When Nessa opened her eyes to check for injuries, she had to shut them immediately. Rocks were pressed against her snout, and silt fell into her eyes. While she didn't usually jump to conclusions, it was pretty obvious she was trapped hundreds of feet below the surface, all alone, and with no means of communicating with anyone. Damn. While both of these facts made her situation dire, she was a dragon after all. One with some magic at her fingertips, no pun intended. Nessa should be able to get out of there. The big question was how long would it take her, and would she survive long enough to reach the surface? The one glimmer of hope was that everyone on the surface would have heard the explosion. Sadly, there was little they could do about it. She was too far down for them to drill a new tunnel. Hell, taken them a month to build the shaft in the first place. When she blew out of breath, her chest screamed in pain. Really? She chanced opening her eyes to smudge and found a mammoth rock sitting on her chest. Not only that, one wing sent under a ton of rubble. Well, double damn. It was worse than she feared. Sure, she was scared, but she was more pissed than anything. This was the third accident and as many months at her family's mine. Might be better to die down here than have to go through the humiliation of having the mining consortium shut them down. Her father had already received 2 warning letters. After this, it would be lights out for them for a long while. Since she was in charge of the safety of the mines, she'd be the fall guy. It would be one thing if Caspian Mining had been guilty of the neglect, but they hadn't been. Nessa had been meticulous at keeping everyone out of harm's way. She grunted. She wouldn't reach the surface by feeling sorry for herself. No one was going to save her, which meant it was up to her to figure something out. The first thing Nessa had to do was move that huge boulder off her body. To do that, though, she needed her claws. Claws that were trapped under a mountain of debris. Ugh. This wasn't going to be easy or painless. Using much of her energy, she worked her claws upward inch by inch. Because one of her wings was not accessible, it wouldn't be of much use until she could free it. Slowly but surely, Nessa edged her talons to the surface, tossing small rocks aside along the way. When one talon broke into view, she took a big breath. Ouch, damn it! Why couldn't she remember that inhaling deeply was painful? Move the damn rock, her dragon complained. I'm planning on it. Sheesh. The only reason she vocalized her comment was to feel less alone. I'm sure help is on the way. In a month, maybe, her dragon shot back. She refused to listen to such negativity. Grabbing one side of the boulder, Nessa pushed while she lifted her right wing a few inches. While not totally free, it was enough to help her move the rock to the side. In the process of shoving it out of the way, though, several ribs cracked. Don't move, her dragon said. Let me heal you. I have no place to go. Have at me. As much as she wanted to pick the debris off her half-buried wing, she waited. And waited some more. Hurry, she pleaded. I'm working as fast as I can. To save energy, Nessa tried to slow her breathing and relax, but that was no easy task. Okay, I've done what I can to repair the ribs, her dragon said, but you will be sore for a while. I'm okay with sore, thank you. She didn't need her animal wasting any more energy healing her, energy she needed to help her get the hell out of there. Moving more rocks, she finally managed to free her right wing completely and part of her left wing. Exhausted from the exercise, Nessa leaned back and tried to figure out what had happened. Where had the explosives come from? She hadn't brought any to the shaft, so what had gone off? The mine was far from all the others, so there was no reason for anyone to be excavating near there. She didn't want to consider that someone wanted her dead. She'd always believed the employees were grateful to her and her family for keeping them safe, but clearly she was wrong. When Nessa pounded a stone in frustration and instantly regretted her burst of anger. More pain sliced across her chest. After waiting a minute to catch her breath, she opened her mouth and shot a hot stream of fire straight at the rock in front of her. The scorching blow blew right through the middle. Having a bit more room to maneuver, she began to claw away the rest of the rocks and dirt from the bottom half of her body. Because she was 15 feet tall, it would be a huge chore to create enough room for her to stand and then spread her wings, but she had to try. After several hours of labor, she finally had the space and stood up, or as close to standing as she could manage. Her left wing at an odd angle, and both of her left wing was at an odd angle, and both of her legs were severely cut. But that wasn't going to stop her from carving her way out of there, no matter how long it took. Knowing what she had to do, Nessa began shoving the larger rocks to the side. By heating them to a high degree, they fused, providing stability to the walls. She just hoped like hell she didn't have to repeat this process for 200 feet straight up. She'd never make it. So that is the first scene. And I hope you liked it. Eventually, when people do read the stories, I hope they will ask questions and we can discuss it. I think it was Cassie Riel who asked about writing tips. And I don't know if she's starting to write, but I know a few of the people here want to actually learn a little bit about maybe what the writing process can be and what it is. So the first thing I have to tell you is, I know it's hard, but you have to write every day. Because you need to create a habit of working every day on your craft. And it doesn't matter if it's an hour, 15 minutes, or 10 hours, which is more like what I work, or more. But obviously most people have a job and they have a family and they don't have that much time. But they need to carve time. Now, I don't ever get up early, never have, but I have a lot of people who, one lady who's New York Times, like every book hit New York Times, she had 3 kids she was raising, and she got up at 4 in the morning and she wrote till 5:30 every morning because she had to get up at 6 to go to work. And that was her time and her alone time. And mostly for me, my husband goes to bed early, so between like 9 and 1, I have complete silence. And people aren't Skyping me, though I love when they do. I don't have to, I'm not cleaning the house or making noise. And so that's my real quiet time that I can get a lot of work done. Not that I don't work in the day, because I do, and I do write a lot, but it's my time to like rewrite, etc. So find some time to write every day, or do something in response to some form of writing activity. And it may be you just reading craft books. And while I don't think I follow the craft books religiously, I have them, and they just get in your brain, and it really, really helps. It can explain deep point of view, it can explain punctuation, it can explain a lot of things. I think you need to set a reasonable goal. I think my first goal was to write 100 words. I like to be an overachiever. 100 words is 10 sentences. You can write 10 sentences. You can even write it on a piece of paper. And if you don't have time, I used to record on my phone. I had a tape recorder. Okay, this is before iPhones. But if you have an iPhone, which can go for hours, if you're driving, just sit it on your lap and start talking. And then when you get home, you can transpose it. Or I'd get an idea about a plot, and I'd if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. Now, if I'm in the middle of the night and I think of something, my phone's next to my bed, and I'll take notes. There's the notepad, and I'll just write something like the titles of some books, or just some little, like one sentence that's really, really cool. So try that if you need anything. I know a lot of people like to plot. A lot of people like to just make it up as they go. I'm kind of halfway in between. I plot, and I write out chapter 1. And I don't do it by chapters, but this is what has to happen in order. And then I send it to Carol, and she will read it over and say, how about this, how about that? Because I always need a another viewpoint, because when you're really close, it's hard. But I think the key here is coming up with a conflict between the main characters. It keeps the story going. I just read you Seduced by Flames. And here is this woman who worships her family. She's highly family devoted, and the whole Hidden Realms is about two different families that are very, very tight. And the mine, both families own a mine, and they are very rich, and they command a lot of power in Pterodon. So the last thing I want is for this mine to shut down. So who would be the absolute worst person in the world for her to realize is her mate? The mining inspector. He is the one who holds her fate in his hands. So, of course, he's the hero. So if you can come up with a story in which the hero and heroine are possibly at odds, now that's not always the case, but if they're at odds or there's a reason why they can't be together, it keeps the story going. So I usually start there. Now, obviously, at some point that changes, otherwise we have no romance. Secondly, I like to pick what the trope of the story is. And a trope are things that you see over and over again. Book 3 is going to be Beauty and the Beast. I won't tell you more than that. This one, of course, is their enemies to friends or enemies to lovers, if I had to put a title to it. You can do, remember the Harlequin days, if you're old enough? Secret Baby, Bad Boy, all sorts of Marriage of Convenience, Second Chance. I love Second Chance stories. And if you want, just ask, and I have a link that I can put in the bottom if you're interested, that is to a website that lists all the tropes. And so if you don't really know what you're interested in writing, you can just go through the tropes. I also have a book that, thank you, Olivia James recommended, and it's on how to deal with an emotional wound. It sounds horrible. There's like 500, 2-page things on how do people react over a death, over someone leaving them, over losing their job, over finding out they're sick. And they're all reactions to them. So in case you haven't lived through that and you can't quite relate, it'll give you some ideas of what might happen in a story. So, okay, Rachel, I will definitely put the link in the bottom. It's really cool. So I think starting out with what is your trope, or what do you like to write or read about? You know, do you want bad boys, motorcycles, some stuff? It's not me. And honestly, I don't want to ever write a story that I'm not in love with. I'm going to spend months with this man and woman. And I want to fall in love with him, just as she is falling in love with him, because she's me, kind of. I mean, I'm not a dragon, but if this happened to me at the bottom of a mine, okay, I probably couldn't claw my way out or try or shoot fire from my hands. But, you know, I would try everything I could to try to get out of that situation. And my heroines have some spunk, and I hope to think I do, because I'm not a doormat. And so you have to sort of, write from your heart, and what do you like to write about? And that's the kind of things I like to write about. So I would also recommend that when I write, try to delete your editor. Otherwise, it will take you months to write a page. And my first draft is really, really, really bad. It doesn't it has he said, she said. It doesn't have he leaned back in his chair. I go back and try to get rid of those. I just want to see if the story flows. And amazingly, if you know, I know what I want to write I try to know what I want to write when I start. And when I write them, I tried. I lost a question because Rachel asked me one. It shows how off I'm here. Okay, let me just. When I'm writing, sometimes I know what the plot is going to be for the next few minutes, and I just keep writing and writing. And half the time, it doesn't match what the plot and the story is. Rachel asked, "Do I know the ending?" It's happily ever after. Do I know who the bad guy is? Well, I just turned in book 3, and I swear it was X, and the last minute, I decided that wasn't right. When I read over it, actually it was Carol who read over it, and said, he would never do that. And I'm like, oh, shit, you're right. The motivation wasn't there, so I completely changed the ending of the story. I try to at least get my major points. I guess for the first book, if you read it, Awakened by Flames, I knew that Kalina and Finn were on different realms, and like, how do I get them together? Oh, well, she's dream walking with him. Well, the only way he'd ever come to Pterodon is if she needed him. Okay, so I need her to be in trouble. Who's she going to be in trouble with? Who are the evil people? Why would they take her? And then obviously we have to beat the bad guy at the end. And since it's a dragon story, most likely there will be a dragon fight in most of the stories. At least I think it makes sense. Either by the original dragon or the mated dragon, or they do it together. I've only written 3 of the stories, so I don't know. So, yes, I do. I know that the bad guy has to be taken down. How? No, I don't know. I do sit down and I try to plot it out, but honestly, when I get about halfway through my plot, it's like I've done the whole plot, and then partway through I realize that's not what the hero and heroine tell me. That's not what they want to do. And, you know, it's really hard. They make the decision. They know whether or not what I'm doing is right. And in the back of my head, if I know it's not right, then I'm like, no one will catch it. And then, okay, Carol's on. Bitch, Carol finds it. She edits my stuff. And then she nails me and said, look, this isn't going to work. And I'm like, yeah, I thought you'd catch me on that, but I was hoping you wouldn't. You know, and your gut is what goes. And Carol just reminded me, I also keep this 15-page spreadsheet, and I have to, because I can't remember who's related to whom, for one, what color are their eyes, what color are their scales, where do they drink, eat, party, what were all their you know, I'm sorry, the brain can't keep track of all that. So I do keep this big spreadsheet, which has about 15 tabs, and actually when I first, I say Carol's here because she actually probably came up with the whole world plan. I flew up to Canada to visit her, and for 3 days we sat in her father-in-law's house out on this beautiful deck overlooking the forest, and we plotted the big overview picture, not the stories themselves as much, but what could my dragons do? What could my white lighters do? My dark lighters? Who were the evil people? Who were the good people? Blah, blah, blah. What could possible stories be? And we did come up with like 5 or 6 possible stories, more or less tropes. Woman in danger, drug use, or, you know, human trafficking, or, you know, big ideas like that. And then they were in my brain, and then as I write this story, they may, you know, pop in. One of my beta readers said, well, you left a thread, a loose thread in book 2. Now, she hasn't gotten back to me what it is, but she told me where it was, and I know what she's talking about. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm going to bring that person in. He's going to get his own story. So just because I introduce a character, usually there's a reason for it. I mean, there really is a bigger picture. And if you've read book 1, I talk about the 4 sisters who run this pottery shop. And I really know who they are. I know what they can do, how they got there, and we did come up with a complete backstory. Maybe this year I'll get around. I want to write a spin-off series called The 4, I don't know what it's called. The 4 Pottery Sisters. No, it'll be Magnolia, Poppy, Acacia, and whatever the other one's called. And I want to have 4 little novellas about them finding love, because they won't take up a whole story because they're really powerful, and that would be different. But I think the four sisters are just absolutely a hoot, and they're just going to bicker at each other, and they're all going to do magic against each other to stop the other one from leaving the fold. And maybe she won't even leave. I don't know. But these are real people. These are kind of real to me. And when they demand a story and they start talking to me, then I'm going to have to, bye Ingrid, then I'm going to have to write their stories. And I'm hoping at sometime in the end of the year, I'll start working on their stories because I'm excited about what they could do. They'll be funny. I don't think they'll be romantic suspense. I mean, you can't capture someone that powerful. She'll just disappear and go someplace else. So they're going to have to be sort of funny and cute, and I don't know if I write 4 of them at one time or how I'm going to do them and where I'll intersperse them, but that's sort of where my mind's going. So if you read about a character and you're like, oh, I have a water dragon. I really like him. And then you didn't talk about him. Yeah, he'll get his own book. Don't worry about it. I do actually kind of plan ahead. I know who book 4 who Declan and Chelsea, who is Finn's twin sister. They're going to be book 4, and that's the next one I'm going to be starting. So, basically, stay tuned for that. I am always up for suggestions. I also would love some comments. Next week, I will be talking about the new project I've been working on. It is, I'll briefly tell you, they are 3 stories that I had written quite a long time ago. And they're contemporary romantic suspense, and they're not up. They were up for a little bit. One was with Siren, though it was an MF, and I got my rights back. Just been sitting on my computer, and I had 2 other books that needed quite a lot of editing. So I've been working on that, and we'll talk about Acacia Primrose. That was the one I forgot. And so I'll be talking about why I'm doing that, and just some other things and by the way, if you want to stop by my online store, you can. And good news, my husband is going to take a look at trying to, because he was a programmer, try to come up with a way to create coupons for you for my online store, so I can occasionally give away 20% coupon off any book on my store, or something like that. It may be a few months in advance. We're still working on them. But please, I will put the link in the bottom of the link to Tropes. And any questions, if you'd like me to do more reading, if you would like me to discuss a topic, please let me know. Because, 52 weeks is a long time. So many there are in a year, and I need to have something. I don't want to bore people and talk about stuff that you have no interest in. So, please ask your questions. And for now, I will see you next week. Bye.